Heart-wrenching loss for the Utah Jazz as they fall to the Boston Celtics 110 to 107. I don't actually even know where to start. I'm kind of in that stunned disbelief, slightly broken heart. I always love when we heart-wrenching loss to the players, heart-wrenching loss to the fans and the broadcasters too. I don't know. Where we start on this one, Ron?
Well, it's obvious that as broadcasters and me being the next player, you actually take these ball games home with you, just like the players do, and you recap and you think, what went wrong and what could they have done better in order to win. But this is one of those ball games where the Boston Celtics, who've had great success over the Jazz over the period of years, this makes 5 in a row, 6 in a row if you count the road win there for the Boston Celtics against the Jazz here. But it was a fun game, and it had a little bit of everything in it.
Al Jefferson still got the bugaboo of never beating the team that's traded him. He now goes to 0-11. He's been the cornerstone of this offense, but it was very clear that Doc Rivers came in, and he was not going to let Millsap, he was not going to let Jefferson beat the Jazz. Most of the night, the Jazz leading scorers were Gordon Hayward and Marvin Williams. What did Boston do?
Well, those were perimeter players there, too, with Marvin Williams and Burks played very, very well. Hayward, obviously, he's just been on a tear. But the Boston Celtics defensively, I thought, even though the Jazz were shooting over 50%, through 3 quarters, they were at 48%. At the half, they were 51%. The Boston Celtics defense overplaying, and not just overplaying of the strong side of the ball, overplaying the weak side of the ball there as well, which means that was not a play where you could just automatically swing it and get something on the weak side of the floor. So defensively, I thought that's where the Boston Celtics ended up winning this ball game, along with Paul Pierce taking it over.
I was just going there. Paul Pierce, they call him sometimes the franchise in Boston. It seems crazy that this guy could be the franchise on a franchise that has had Red Auerbach and Dave Cowens and John Havlicek and the great Larry Bird. But when you go through the Boston Celtics record books, this guy is, if he's not at the top, he's right one spot below John Havlicek in most things. Well, this is one of the all-time great Celtics, and he showed it tonight.
And he's moving up the ladder in every statistical category, including games played. This is his 15th year in the NBA, and he's a Celtic. That's the great thing about the Boston Celtics. They get a player that that plays well for them. They actually hang on to him. Just think of the history of this team, from Sam Jones to Bill Russell to Havlicek to Bird to Dave Cowens. All of those guys that have been great players in that Celtic uniform. They hang in the rafters there as well.
So if you look at it from a Jazz standpoint, you're always trying to find, what happened, where was it, what could have we done, what went wrong. That's kind of the way you look at it tonight. Do you just tip your hat to these two guys that are, 15 and 18-year veterans who've just won so many games, they know how to win games? The Jazz were up by 7. It was like, okay, here we go. And then they just tore up the Jazz to close the third quarter. The Jazz did a nice job getting back into it. Or do you look at the Jazz and say, you got to learn how to play 48 minutes. You don't know yet what to do to win these games.
Probably both. Yeah, you definitely play both. With the Jazz not being in this position a lot, and they had young players out there on the floor. Yeah, they have to learn how to close basketball games off. But you have experienced players out there with the Boston Celtics who know how to close basketball games off. So, and that 32-19 third quarter actually I thought did the Jazz in, because I thought the Celtics were right to be picked. The Jazz had played very, very well. They come from behind. They led by 5. They're going into the third period in a great position where if they had a good third period, then they could probably win this ball game.
You just think about some of the key possessions tonight, and it's kind of, I guess I tip my hat to the Celtics. That third quarter where the Jazz just couldn't get anything, and then there were really our overtime possessions. I didn't have a lot of choices. Ty could run our sets. We couldn't get the ball to Al because Kevin's defense was so good. We tried to run through some things. There was a possession where Millsap ends up just kind of throwing up a prayer at the shot clock. Hayward ended up with he tried to spread the floor, go one-on-one. Hayward ended up with a air ball 3. There just were not many things we could get done offensively against their pressure defense.
And the reason for that is that I thought the Jazz took just a little bit too long trying to get the basketball into Al Jefferson. And when you do that, you end up putting your back against the wall with the shot clock. And so that's exactly what happened. Paul having to force us some shots because the clock is running down. Gordon having to try to penetrate and just try to make something happen in a short period of time. It just didn't work for the Jazz.
So the Jazz fall to Boston, and we haven't really dug into this, but maybe now's the time. You start analyzing the playoff position. The Warriors winning the last 3, and they seem to be wrecked by it, and they have a heavy home schedule. They seem pretty safe. Houston plays the easiest schedule, I think, of anyone in the NBA, or at least in the bottom 5 in the NBA, the rest of the way. They're probably still a little vulnerable because of just where they sit in the standings with 27 losses, but their schedule leads you to believe they're going to be fine. In fact, if you look at John Hollinger's playoff odds, he has them finishing 6th and the Warriors 7th. That leaves us. And the Lakers lost tonight, but they're charging. And it, in all likelihood, is going to come down to us or the Lakers as that playoff team. If you just kind of unbiasedly analyze the schedules. Our schedule is very difficult, 9th hardest in the NBA the rest of the way. We only have 4 games all year on the road against below 500 teams left to go, and we have only beat 1 above 500 team. You can't let, I don't know if this slipped away. I mean, Boston's really good, but you need to find a way to win every one you possibly can the rest of the way.
And that's the reason this ball game and the 3 remaining basketball games you have going into March was very important, because I thought if the Jazz were able to win this week, the 3 ball games here at home, maybe go 2-4 on this next road trip, then I thought that would put them in a great position there to at least finish 7th, because you'll still be in that survival mode for the rest of the year. But I thought that would put them in a great position. I agree with you as far as Houston is concerned. Houston scores. Nothing stops them from scoring. Sometimes it gets them into trouble by the way they do score, but they score, and I think that's going to be a team that's going to be awfully difficult to keep them out of the playoffs.
Jazz tonight fall to the Boston Celtics, final 110-107 in overtime. On behalf of Ron, I'm David. Have a good night. Be safe.